Detective Mark Jensen had seen a lot of things in his 25 years on the force, but he had never seen a face like hers. He and his partner, Officer Miller, had been called to a single vehicle accident on a winding, rain-slicked mountain road. It wasn't a complex scene. A vintage 1970s Mustang had sailed over the guardrail, tumbling 100 feet down a ravine before coming to a rest, a crumpled heap of twisted metal and shattered dreams. The driver, a young man, was found pinned inside, unresponsive. The passenger, a woman, had been thrown clear and was now sitting on the muddy ground a few yards from the wreckage. Her face was the one that stopped him cold. It wasn't a face of grief. It wasn't a face of shock. It wasn't even a face of pain, though a deep gash ran across her forehead, and her arm was bent at a grotesque, unnatural angle. It was a face of unburdened, serene relief. A quiet, almost tranquil calm had settled over her features. Her eyes, a startling shade of green, were wide and placid, watching the chaos unfold around her with an unnerving detachment. A thin smile, almost imperceptible, touched the corners of her mouth. "Miller," Jensen said, his voice a low growl, "read me her name from her license." Officer Miller, a younger man with a nervous energy, crouched beside the woman. He fumbled through her muddy wallet. Sarah Jenkins, age 28. Her, Jensen said, his eyes never leaving her face. "She's the one. Something about this is wrong." Sarah didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't ask about the driver, about the man who was now being carefully, frantically, cut from the wreckage by the fire department. She simply watched, her expression unchanging. She looked, to Jensen's seasoned eye, like a predator who had just finished a long, satisfying meal. The official story, the one that would be written down in the initial report, was that she was suffering from shock, a common reaction to a traumatic event. But Jensen's gut, a reliable compass honed by years of seeing the worst of humanity, told him something else. He had seen grief. He had seen shock. This was neither. This was something colder, something more terrifying. He had a theory, one he knew he couldn't articulate without sounding crazy. This woman, Sarah Jenkins, had wanted to get rid of the driver, and she had succeeded. But a good detective, even one guided by intuition, needed facts. And the facts, at first, seemed to contradict him. The victim was her boyfriend, Ethan Cole. They were on their way back from a weekend trip. The car had been a gift to him for his birthday. The road, as it was known for being dangerous. The rain was a complication, and the single tire mark showed a clear skid. It looked, to all outward appearances, like a tragic accident, an unfortunate, cruel twist of fate. But every time Jensen looked at Sarah's face, at that serene, unsettling calm, he knew he had to dig deeper. He had to prove his suspicion, even if it meant looking like a fool. The interviews with Sarah in the following days were a study in polite resistance. She was lucid, articulate, and calm, her voice a soft, steady murmur. She answered every question with a measured, almost practiced ease. She spoke of her relationship with Ethan as if she were reading from a brochure. He was kind, he was funny, he was a successful architect. She offered no tears, no raw emotion. "Were you and Mr. Cole having any disagreements?" Jensen asked, his voice low and probing. "No, we were very happy," she replied, her face a serene mask. "He was driving fast, wasn't he? He was excited about his new car, she said, a small sad smile touching her lips. He loved the road. It was just a terrible mistake. He tried every trick in the book. He spoke of the guilt she must feel. He spoke of the pain. He spoke of the man she had loved. She remained impassive, a fortress of calm. He even showed her a picture of the wreckage, the twisted metal, the broken glass. Her expression remained unchanged. Jensen, defeated and frustrated, finally excused himself. He had nothing. No motive, no evidence, nothing but his gut feeling and a woman's face that he couldn't get out of his head. He had to find a way to make her crack. He needed to get into her life, into her past. He sent Miller to talk to her friends, her family, anyone who knew her. Miller, a by-the-book detective, came back with a stack of reports that only further complicated things. Sarah Jenkins was a model citizen. She was a respected kindergarten teacher, beloved by her students and their parents. She volunteered at a local animal shelter. She had no criminal record, no history of violence, no known psychological issues. The reports all painted the same picture: a kind, gentle, good-hearted woman. It was the exact opposite of what Jensen was seeing. The only thing that gave him a shred of hope was a stray comment from one of Sarah's friends, a woman named Emily. Ethan could be a lot, Emily had said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He was controlling. He was jealous. He didn't like her talking to other men. He didn't like her friends. She was getting thin, you know. She wasn't herself. It was a lead, but a flimsy one. A jealous boyfriend wasn't a motive for murder. A controlling partner was a red flag, but not a smoking gun. Jensen was at a dead end. He felt the case slipping through his fingers, a feeling he hated. He had to be wrong. He had to be. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw that placid, serene smile on Sarah's face. He knew he was right. He went to the one place he hadn't yet been, the apartment Sarah and Ethan had shared. He told Miller to stay outside. This was personal. He walked into the place, a sleek, modern space with a view of the city. He looked at their life, a life laid out like a brochure. Expensive furniture, framed pictures of them smiling, a life of apparent perfection. But as he looked closer, he started to see the cracks. The empty space on the wall where a painting once hung. The small locked box on a shelf, its key conspicuously absent. The calendar on the fridge, every day meticulously planned. Every event noted in Ethan's neat, precise handwriting. It was a life built not on a partnership, but on control. He looked for anything that would prove his theory. He went through her drawers, his hands a blur. He found no weapons, no illicit items, nothing. Just clothes, perfectly folded, and books with their pages well worn. He was about to give up when he noticed a loose floorboard in the bedroom closet. It was a trick as old as time, and he felt a surge of hope. He lifted the board and found a small, worn notebook. He flipped it open, his heart pounding. It wasn't a diary. It was a log of every bruise, every insult, every act of control. A log of every time Ethan had told her she was worthless, every time he had isolated her, every time he had threatened to hurt her or her family. It was a chilling testament to a life of quiet terror. But that wasn't all. Tucked inside the last page was a small, folded piece of paper. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the contents. It was a doctor's report. a psychologist's report, from a few weeks ago. The report detailed Sarah's mental state. She was suffering from severe PTSD, anxiety, and depression. The report noted that she felt trapped, and that she had been contemplating suicide for a long time. It also noted that the calm she was exhibiting was a textbook response to a traumatic event. It was a deep-seated dissociation, a form of self-preservation where the mind shuts down to protect itself from the horrors of the world. It was a state of unburdened, serene relief, because for her, the nightmare was over. He had been so wrong. He had been so sure that her face was a mask of cold, calculated cruelty, but it was a mirror of her shattered mind. The serene relief he had seen was not the relief of a murderer, but the profound, overwhelming relief of a survivor. The smile was not one of satisfaction, but the ghost of a happy memory, of a life she had been fighting to get back. The placid eyes were not those of a predator, but the vacant stare of a woman who had been through a living hell, and had finally, miraculously, escaped. He walked out of the apartment, the notebook and the doctor's report clutched in his hand. He looked at Officer Miller, who was leaning against the car, his face a mask of boredom. "Miller," he said, his voice a low, unsteady whisper, "we were wrong. She's not our killer. She's our witness." He drove back to the station in a haze. He thought about his own judgment, about how quickly he had condemned a woman based on a single, misleading expression. He had seen what he wanted to see, a cold, calculating killer, because it fit his preconceived notions of what evil looked like. But evil didn't always have a face of hatred. Sometimes, it had a face of quiet terror. The case was reopened, this time with a new angle. They looked at Ethan Cole, at his past, at his records. They found a history of domestic abuse, a pattern of control and violence. The new investigation revealed that Sarah had been trying to leave him for months, but he had threatened to harm her and her family if she ever did. The tragic accident on the mountain road wasn't a murder, it was a desperate, chaotic escape. A last, final act of a man trying to control a woman he couldn't have. Sarah, a survivor, was not a villain, but a hero. But she would never be seen that way by the world. And even after her name was cleared, the whispers would remain. The memory of that face, a memory of a woman who was too calm, too serene, too at peace, would forever be etched in the minds of the public. Jensen, for his part, had learned a lesson that day, a lesson that would change his career forever. He learned that a face can tell a story, but it can also tell a lie. He learned that the most profound truths are often hidden behind the most deceptive masks. He had spent his life hunting monsters, but that day, he had found that the greatest monster of all was not a person, but a preconceived notion, a judgment so swift and so powerful that it could turn an innocent woman into a villain. And as he looked at Sarah's face in the news reports, a face that was now tearful, traumatized, and filled with a pain so deep it was almost unreadable, he knew that he had been the one who had made the first mistake, the first judgment, the first betrayal. Her face, in the end, was not a reflection of her guilt, but a reflection of his own.